Describe how AIM solutions can provide more robust security for existing infrastructure. That's the conversation of the next episode.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to more CySA Plus. That's right. I threw an acronym right up front to
Right
you.
out of the gate.
That's right. Let's talk a little bit more about this thing called identity and access management. Dan, let's go ahead and start with, I guess our first topic, and that's privilege management. And we've got a lot to discuss, don't we?
We do have a lot to discuss in this part because privilege management is one of the most fundamental ways in which we control what a user can and cannot do, what they can access, what they can do once they can access something. That's going to be the topic of conversation under privilege management. So think of it this way. It's going to be the technical pieces that enforce policy, right? If that makes sense. So let's start off with a simple thing, something we're probably all familiar with, but we might not be specifically familiar with the types, right? And think of something like file access, okay? Something we deal with all every day. If I'm in my computer, I want to access a file. It's going to have permissions associated with it that's going to dictate what I as a user, my identity, can and cannot access. So hence identity and access management. There you go. That's the soup we're making today. A few different types of control mechanisms that you're going to run into when it comes to CySA is going to be discretionary access control, mandatory access control, role-based access control. Let me get the last one, attribute-based access control. Fun, right? There are others. So if you see others and you're like, hey, Daniel didn't talk about that, not specifically like labeled or named in the exam. I don't want to give you too much. I don't want to flood you, right? Drinking from a fire hose kind of thing. We got enough to learn as it is. So I'm just going to make sure you get what you need for this. So let's start off with that discretionary access control, or DAC, right? So this is where the owner of a resource, they're basically the kind of like the little king of all those resources that they are the owner of, right? So if Wes is a user on the system, I'm a user on the system, anything I create, I own, it's mine. Anything Wes creates, he owns, it's his. And when they say discretionary, what they're talking about is like, at my discretion, I can change what Wes can or cannot do with the things that I own. Whenever I feel like it, I can change that. If I just get, I woke up on a Tuesday on the wrong side of the bed and said, you know what, Wes is not accessing this file anymore. I can remove those permissions. I have that control because I am the owner of that object, okay? Discretionary access control. So to think of it as going in there and removing read permissions from a file, all right? And let's just visualize this a little better. Let's jump into the computer and we'll play with a file, right? So I'll create a file, touch, and we'll call it my file 1, right? And now if I ls-l my file 1, we can see some information about that file, like here's the actual file name, here's the last time it was modified, and then over here we have the owner of the file, which is me, and we have the group owner of the file, which is also my personal group, which gets created at the user creation time. And then of course over here is our discretionary access policy, which says by default when I created the file, it gave the owner read writes, the group read write, and any other system user, right, user type object, which would be a user or a group, would also have read, not read write. But I can change that. I can use the chmod command to say, you know what, for the user, or the, I'm going to say, yeah, for the owner basically, which is the -u, I'm going to say that's going to equal rwx. I'm going to give myself x permissions, or I could do like u plus x to that effect. And then I'll do that with group too. So UG, I'll give that plus X, and then I'll say O will equal just read and write. Okay, so there we go. And then the file, this is my file 1. We rerun our command, and you notice that at my discretion, those permissions have changed because I have that ability. So that is discretionary access control. Wes gets to do that with his stuff. I get to do that with my stuff. And there is a system administrator who has full control over everything, no matter who owns it. If they need to, they can take ownership of it. We see that a lot when inside of a Windows system, where if someone was the owner of a particular object and then that owner goes away. Maybe they're no longer with the organization. We've removed their accounts. Now we've got these orphaned items. The administrator can take ownership of it or give ownership to somebody else. That's still discretionary access, okay? Now let's move into mandatory access. It's a little bit different. With mandatory, this is, instead of working on the user level, it usually works with the types of labels, right? What they call labels. And this is a type of access, right? So I say, well, you're of the label this, or you're of the label that, and therefore you have this type of access or that type of access. It changes, right? I'm trying to come up with a good analogy of how they use it. I guess think of military systems, because this is where this type of system is typically utilized, is in military, government, any kind of intelligence community. So you have secret level, right? That's your label. You are a secret level clearance. Therefore, you can access anything that has secret level or under, right? Anything at your level or under, you're not going to be able to go above, right? So think of it like that. Only the system owner can change those clearance levels. So if I need Wes to have more clearance levels, I, as the system owner, would have to give him that access. Or I would have to take the object and change the object access for that. He's not able to do it. He's not able, at his discretion, to create things that he can change. Oh, well, I'm the admin. No. It's not how it works, right? So that's kind of how that works. Now, inside of our own systems in everyday life, we do see this implemented in some way. If you've ever played with SE Linux or AppArmor, that is a type of mandatory access control. Jump back into the computer. I'll show you. If I do sudo AppArmor _status and put in my password, because I am, if I can type it correctly, hopefully I did. Nah, it's going to hate me. Yep. I'll try it one more time. It'll show me the status of AppArmor, which I have installed and running, and I'm seeing the different labels, which are basically enforced or complaint, right? So I see I've got profiles that are in force mode, and I've got 63 profiles totally loaded, and then here are some in complaint mode down here, right? Down here, we see that I created one for Nginx. I've created some process profiles that are in enforce mode, and we can see that work. I got my browser here. If I look at this safe.index.html, you can see that I have permission, but as just a standard user, without those permissions, I'll get 403 forbidden to anything I stick in that directory. So I've labeled them safe and unsafe. Anything that goes in safe, people can see. Anything that goes in unsafe, people can't see. You're going to get a forbidden. You would need to have a higher level of access. So there you go. That's mandatory access control. Moving along, RBAC, right? This is Wes's favorite because there's two types of RBAC. And what were you telling me that they changed the acronym because it was the same acronym?
I don't know why they did this, because we have a lot of acronyms that are the same, but this one, they changed it from rule-based access control to something known as rule set-based access control, but that's not the one we're talking about here. We're talking about role-based access control, right?
Yes. So let's keep those things straight in our heads. With role-based access control, it's kind of a mandatory access control mechanism because it's non-discretionary, right? So it kind of follows along that vein a little bit, or at least it seems to. But you define roles. I've worked with these in production systems. I used to work with this software called ImageWrite, and ImageWrite was role-based access control. I would have to go in and create roles. This is what someone does, and this is their role. If they're assigned to that role, then this is the things they gain access to, the things they can and cannot do, right? So it was very strange, but once I got my head wrapped around it, I really liked it. And then, of course, Windows-based systems they love role-based access. Even though it's not true role-based access, basically the way they advise you to create rules in your system for access is to create a role, make that a group, put the users in that group, and then assign permissions that group needs to do to the group. So all I'd have to do, if I hire Wes and he's a developer, I put him in the developers group, and now he has access to everything that he needs as far as permissions go. And that's a role-based type of access. Now, again, that's a real subtle way. It's not true role-based access, but it's basically mimicking that inside of those systems.
Well, in some ways, we implement role-based access control in Linux and Windows systems, and we probably don't think about it because you have a Windows administrator. That's a predefined role before
It
you've
is.
ever even logged in the machine. We have standard users. We have the root user and regular users in Linux, right? These are already predefined roles that are built into the operating system, and we assign a person to that role that already exists within the operating system. And then based on the level of access that they're supposed to have, that's the resources that they gain access to.
Yeah, the Windows, they love to dip their toe into every kind
Oh,
of thing,
absolutely.
right?
That's right.
Because you get discretionary, because you can set your own permissions on stuff, but you can also create roles. It's just one big grab bag in the Windows operating system, right? So let's move on to attribute-based access controls, right? And the ABAC, fun. ABAC. What's a back? I don't know. It's on your back. Okay. How do I define that without using the word? But really cool. And this is one of the more fine-grained types of access controls, which is going to allow me to set context with things like attributes, user and group, right? What IP are you coming from? What protocol are you using? What time is it when you do that? And so you're going to see this really like if then, and this, then that kind of idea of access control. So again, I can't think of any systems off the top of my head. It's probably going to be some third-party like bolt-on that's going to have that, or if you're using some sort of custom software or third-party software, you might run into this type of access control. But I think maybe a NAC, or a NAP, those types of devices that go, let me do a status check, right? You've got the agent installed. Great. Is it up to date? Great. If it's not, sorry, no access. Or I'm going to quarantine you over here. That kind of access control seems to be along those lines. Is it within the context of the right time and date and even location?
Well, think about the device. You can do device attributes that say, hey, if you have a jailbroken phone, that's an attribute of that phone. You can't, I mean, your identity is, it's Dan. He's the administrator, right?
Yeah.
But we have a security policy that says no jailbroken phones, and that's an attribute of Dan that he has this phone, right?
Exactly.
It's not his identity, right? So I've seen that too, and I've seen that in things like the earlier implementation of things like work folders, where you access something, right? Now that blurs the line with location-based access, but
does.
let's go ahead and just say if I'm accessing this from my workstation, I gain access to the resource. If I'm at home, I'm the same user. It's still the same identity, but because I'm at home, I don't get access to
I
it.
think that's the true like control with ABAC is that it's all those things.
Exactly.
It's not just
And
one.
not just one.
Right.
That's
You're
right.
grabbing bits and pieces from like all the different types of access controls and going, well, it's got to be this perfect storm of stuff or you don't get access. And then you can set that up. It looks very XML based, I think, type of programming for the rule sets, but super powerful, fine grained. That's the way we like it.
All right, so Dan, there is another thing out there that helps us to kind of secure our infrastructure when it comes to identity, and that is something called multi-factor authentication. And I know that's something that we use inside of IT Pro TV. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a great way to bolt on some extra security for when you are dealing with identities and access management because, well, we've complained about it for years, right? That the password, why are we still using passwords? Well, they work and they don't work, right? You can use secure passwords. If you are diligent with your policies and the way you operate as far as passwords go, you can be really secure with that. But it never hurts to go the extra mile. And MFA or 2FA will allow you to do that kind of thing where I can say, not only do I know my password to prove that I am who I say I am, but I can also give you something like a thumbprint or vocal recognition, facial recognition. All these things, other things that you can do, use certificate-based authentication. So not only do I type in a password, but I've got to like put in a key card with a certificate on a RFID chip, right? Great. That is two methods. Now, if I was an attacker, my job is doubly hard because I could hack that password all day long. But if I don't have that card, if I don't have that thumbprint, if I don't have that face, I'm not going to gain access. Even location, again, bring it right back up. Maybe I'm logging in from the wrong area. I've actually received those emails. I don't know about yourself. That says, are you logging into Yahoo Mail from Uzbekistan? No, I'm not in Uzbekistan. Thank you for telling me. And I love that those features, and Yahoo has had historically some trouble with people's emails getting hacked. So they've really bolstered up a lot of their security. And while minorly inconvenient, having that multi-factor authentication has very much increased their security for that. So I feel more comfortable using it now in my day-to-day life. And we could do that too. So don't think that's never an option. And you can get USB pluggable thumbprint readers and that kind of stuff to plug into your devices. There's many different ways in which you could implement 2FA or MFA.
Dan, I know that for end users, right? If you've got the culture security behind you, the security mindset, you're probably like Dan and I, where if it says you want to reduce the amount of times multi-factor authentication is required, you say no. That's why we've implemented it, right? No, we don't want to do that, right? So that's for security mindset, right? However, your average end user doesn't want to have to use a password to log into this device, use a password to log into this application, log in a password to get my email, right? Because then you have multiple passwords, and if a single password's hard to manage, can you imagine 4 or 5 passwords? And that's where something like SSO comes in.
Yeah, single sign-on, it's SSO, as Wes was pointing out. This is a great solution for that. Again, as everything, it's got pros and cons, but the pros side is that, yes, there is a management security weakness around having multiple different logins to multiple different areas, right? You're more likely to create a login that is weaker than others. Maybe that's by design. You don't have any control over that. Well, so what if we just had one user account with one password that gave me access to all the disparate systems inside of our organization, and that really would save a lot of that hassle. I wouldn't be creating bad passwords. I would have to focus my time and effort on one password, and then I would gain access to everything that I need. We see this inside of Windows systems. Actually, Kerberos is a single sign-on type of system where you have one username and password, gives me access to, I can log into Wes's workstation, Wes can log into mine. We're not cross-pollinating data or information. I'm getting my desktop, he's getting his. And based off of our controls, that can go one way or the other, but we are still staying separate. I can go anywhere I want inside my org, grab a hold of those resources and gain access to them. So that's the pros of single sign-on.
And we see this probably in almost every day-to-day, all of our day-to-day interactions. If you're working on the internet, I think of things like my Gmail account. I can log into Google Docs. I can log into anything really in the Google platform, provided that I'm signed up for it. I think
most cloud services.
Yeah, absolutely, like Office 365. Yeah, speaking of cloud services, now let's take that a little bit farther. That's SSO, right? Yeah. I'm a healthcare provider, and we work with a lot of doctors, and I need maybe not complete access to sensitive information, but I need to be able to log in across those systems that are owned by two completely separate entities, and we need to do that in a secure fashion, right? Yeah. Is that where something like Federation comes in?
Yeah, that's Federation. Let's jump into that. I want to get the cons on.
We got to get the cons.
Yeah, don't forget.
Because
that's cool because single sign-on and Federation kind of go hand in hand.
They really do. Yeah, sure.
They're very much married a lot of the times. Let's finish out with the cons on that, and we'll move into Federation.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's just such a natural progression. The cons with single sign-on is that if I gain access to Wes's account, I get that, and we don't have multi-factor, then I've gained access to everything, right? So the pro is if I have one account that gives me access to everything. The con is I have one account that gives me access to everything, and if it becomes compromised, now we have a tire fire on our hands, and it's going to be a real problem. So that moves us into Federation. Federation services basically is telling us that we're taking that single sign-on idea, and let's say Wes runs Wes's gears, and I'm Daniel's bike shop, and I'm like, you know what? Wes makes some great gears. I'd like to incorporate his gears into my bike. Let's do a partnership, and we partner up as a company. Well, now, if Wes's people need to log in to my systems to see designs for bikes so they can make sure the gears fit and all the designs are correct, that's going to be really difficult because now I got to create and manage user accounts for his people. He's got to create user accounts and manage them for my people so that we can log in. That's a nightmare. We use Federation, and now I can trust users from wes'sgears.com, and he can trust users from danielsbikes.com, right? And I have my one username and my password, and I can access the things that he's given me access to. That's a Federation. So really cool to take that single sign-on solution and marry it to cross organizations. And that's what we're looking at with Federation that can do a lot to help us administratively and security-wise. I can set security on just the objects, and then no matter who it is, they're going to gain the correct permissions for it. So administrative headache goes down and security goes up a bit.
You know, and we see this in large platforms that handle a lot of identity and access management solutions. I want you to think of the last time you've logged into an application with your Google account. It says log in with your Google account or log into this application with your Facebook account. Why is that application trusting Facebook? It's a federation that's going on in the background with their identities. Now, Dan, I'm thinking of the last topic that we got to talk about here, but I'm thinking like I got to go download the instructor or user manual. I'm not actually sure what this one is. What is manual review?
So manual review is the fact that we need to be reviewing in some way, maybe using a SIEM or looking at syslogs, or that is actually going through and making sure that we're looking for anomalies in our identities and our access management. We need to be cleaning out old user accounts and service accounts that aren't being used anymore because they could be used to compromise the system. That's the kind of manual review that we're talking about here. Looking at log files, seeing, do I see a bunch of errors or for a specific user? Maybe I'm seeing some failures for access and I need to get to the bottom of that. What's that all about? I can use systems to aggregate those and make my life a little bit easier, make that an easier lift, but it does need to be done and we don't need to forget about it when it comes to identity and access management. We need to make sure that we are reviewing our users and our accounts and the permissions that are acceptable for those environments. Otherwise, things are going to slip through the cracks and we're going to leave ourselves open and have a weakness and a vulnerability that might be exploited one day. So don't forget that manual review.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about a lot of different things that can help assist our identity and access management solutions. And remember, you're going to have to be able to describe things like privilege management, MFA, SSO, federation, and what manual review is so that if you're given a scenario, you can apply the correct security solution. Now, we've got more to come when it comes to CySA Plus, but like I said before, we do not have enough time in this episode, so we'll see you in the upcoming episodes.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.